Imagine a mind that operates not as a singular force, but as a battlefield, where hidden desires, rigid rules, and a balancing force constantly struggle for control. This was the groundbreaking perspective that Sigmund Freud introduced to the world, changing our understanding of human psychology forever. Freud proposed that our psyche is not a single unified entity, but a complex structure divided into three conflicting forces: the ID, the ego, and the superego. Each of these plays a crucial role in shaping our thoughts, behaviors, and inner conflicts, making us who we are. To understand ourselves and the depths of our motivations, we must explore these forces in detail. At the heart of Freud's model lies the id, the most primitive and instinctual part of the psyche. The ID operates entirely on the pleasure principle, seeking instant gratification without concern for logic, morality, or long-term consequences. It is the seat of our deepest desires, impulses, and urges, the raw energy that drives our hunger, lust, aggression, and survival instincts. The id knows nothing of patience or reason. It simply demands what it wants. Imagine a newborn crying for food or comfort without any consideration for the parent's exhaustion. This is the pure expression of the ID in action. As we grow, the ID does not diminish, but rather continues to exist beneath the surface, influencing our subconscious urges and irrational impulses. It is the wild, untamed aspect of our nature that civilization constantly tries to suppress. The ID is also the source of creative energy, imagination, and uninhibited passion. It is responsible for our deepest fantasies, which may never surface into the conscious mind, but continue to influence us in ways we do not always recognize. Freud argued that much of human behavior is driven by the unconscious desires of the id, and when left unchecked, these impulses can manifest in destructive ways. This is why repression, a mechanism employed by the ego and superego, often plays a crucial role in shaping our behavior. However, repression does not eliminate these desires. It merely buries them deeper, where they can resurface in dreams, slips of the tongue, Freudian slips, or even neuroses. Despite its primal nature, the ID is not inherently bad. It is the source of our most basic needs, including the instinct for survival. It is what compels us to seek nourishment, warmth, comfort, and love. In a way, the ID is the driving force that keeps us alive, pushing us to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Yet, without regulation, it would lead to chaos, acting purely on instinct, without regard for consequences. This is why the ego and superego exist, to bring order to this raw, untamed energy. Opposing the ID is the superego, the moral compass of the psyche. If the ID is chaos, the superego is structure and discipline. It develops as we internalize societal values, parental teachings, and cultural norms, becoming the voice of conscience that guides our sense of right and wrong. The superego does not seek pleasure but rather demands perfection. It reprimands us for wrongdoing, inducing feelings of guilt and shame when we stray from moral expectations. It enforces ideals that are often impossible to fully achieve, leading to inner turmoil when we fail to meet its high standards. If the id is an untamed beast, the superego is an unyielding judge, always watching, always critiquing, and never fully satisfied. The superego develops during early childhood as children begin to absorb the rules and expectations of their environment. It is divided into two components, the conscience and the ideal self. The conscience punishes us with feelings of guilt when we act against moral standards, while the ideal self pushes us toward an unattainable perfection. This can lead to self-criticism, anxiety, and even self-destructive tendencies when one feels they have not lived up to their own expectations or the expectations imposed by society. Because the superego is shaped by cultural and social influences, it varies from person to person. What one culture deems moral, another may see as immoral. This subjectivity reveals how deeply our upbringing and environment shape our internal sense of right and wrong. A rigid superego can lead to excessive self-restraint, emotional repression, and an inability to enjoy life due to the constant fear of making mistakes or violating moral codes. Caught between these two opposing forces is the ego, the rational mediator that navigates reality. The ego operates on the reality principle, striving to satisfy the id's desires in ways that are socially acceptable, while also appeasing the moralistic demands of the superego. It is the part of the psyche that negotiates, delays gratification, and finds compromises. Unlike the id and superego, which exist primarily in the unconscious mind, the ego operates in both the conscious and unconscious realms, acting as the decision-maker that governs daily behavior. The ego must constantly manage the pressures from both sides, the relentless demands of the id and the rigid rules of the superego. It is the balancing force that allows us to function in society without succumbing to our most base instincts, or being paralyzed by excessive guilt and self-criticism. The ego is responsible for problem-solving, planning, and decision-making. It considers the external world and adjusts behavior accordingly, ensuring that we can function within society. It is flexible and adaptive, able to delay gratification in pursuit of long-term goals. Without the ego, we would be unable to navigate the complexities of life, as we would either act impulsively, driven by the id, or be paralyzed by guilt and self-doubt, driven by the superego. One of the ego's most important functions is defense. To maintain balance and prevent psychological distress, the ego employs various defense mechanisms, such as repression, denial, projection, and rationalization. These mechanisms help us cope with uncomfortable emotions, conflicts, and realities. While some defense mechanisms are healthy, overuse can lead to psychological issues, as individuals may become disconnected from their true desires or trapped in self-deception. Freud's model explains much of the internal conflict we experience. When the id overpowers the ego, impulsive and destructive behaviors emerge, acting on forbidden desires, reckless decisions, and indulgence without consideration of consequences. When the superego dominates, an individual may become overly self-critical, anxious, or trapped in a cycle of guilt and unrealistic moral expectations. A well-functioning psyche requires a strong ego that can effectively mediate these forces, maintaining stability and adaptability in the face of life's challenges. Ultimately, Freud's theory reveals the complex and often contradictory nature of human behavior. The interplay between the id, ego, and superego shapes our personalities, relationships, and struggles. While modern psychology has evolved beyond Freud's initial ideas, his framework remains a foundational concept in understanding the hidden forces of the mind. By recognizing these forces within ourselves, we can gain greater self-awareness and navigate life with a deeper understanding of our inner conflicts and motivations.